Good. Oh, that's Darren.
Okay. So Darren and I I found to be a very interesting experience, which is a lead-in to the Paso Royale well treatment plant. And these are these tours that John has asked me to arrange. And Darren, as of last night, we're going to make them a weekly event. And so I'll start inviting other people to come join us. I would love to see what you thought of that tour.
Okay, and the mic is hot.
We
We
can hear
begin
you.
bombing in 15 minutes. Okay, so if anybody remembers the Reagan years. Okay, I thought it was very interesting, and I thought that it was very transparent, and that we got a really good view of what's going on, particularly when we talk about the difference between available infrastructure and the available human resources, right? And where the city is at in managing both of those sets of challenges. Um, it, and I guess, I don't know if you mentioned, Carl, that we also toured the BDD facility,
Right.
huh? Okay, so and it's very apparent the difference, and this is something we've been talking about for years, of looking at the whole system, not just the plant, separately, Paseo Real and the Buckman diversion separately, because for those of us in the lower river, the plant is our primary treatment facility, right? So even if we're not talking about complete potable reuse yet, I'm glad to see that's that seed is in the mind of city utilities at the moment, and that I was really impressed with the utilities director's assessment of where they are at in terms of, like I said, having infrastructure and then having available human resources that can manage that infrastructure. So, the biggest thing that we've seen as far as results-based accountability is that we've seen the E. coli levels going down, right? And John Dupuy was able to show us around and identify the exact places in the process that have failed, which are pretty simple ones if you're paying attention, right? So there's a whole. It seems that since we've lost him from the county and now he goes to the city, at least we have the mentality that it is not a closed system, but it's a unified system, and there are, after effects and identifiable outcomes on the discharge of that plant into the lower river, right? And those improvements are being made not necessarily in terms of physical infrastructure, but in process, and that's a key step that maybe has been missing for several years. So at least it's being paid attention to, and the options that are being talked about are realistic. And instead of let's just get a new plant and put it there as if that's the be all end all, there's more sense in doing the rehab. And I was particularly pleased to see that the conceptual thinking is trending away from the return flow credit paper pipeline scam into treating water that can be returned to the natural course of the Santa Fe River and make its way back to the Rio Grande as the creator intended. So happy to see that, and I got to say, I walked away from it not being pessimistic or bummed out or feeling defeated, but a little more hopeful about what we have in front of us. And I think that the continuing communication that Carl is facilitating is part of that, and it's what we don't look at all the time when we look at physical infrastructure and this and dollar amounts. We neglect the human element, right? I was especially I guess, I don't know, not impressed, but it took my attention to find out that even BDD is understaffed, right? And that,
Oh,
and so that where the idea is to promote from within there, and that's a good one. The problem is they're running out of lower level personnel to continue training up into the
right.
higher operator positions, right? I think I gathered that they're somewhere around 50 to 75% staffed, right? So that's one part of it. But uh, I don't know. To sum up, looking at the whole thing as one integrated system and seeing that mentality in action gives me a little more hope that we have less maybe to mitigate in the lower river and more to co-manage, right? And that's really a possibility. So uh, it was all in all a very good experience, and I'm glad we got there just to physically see it. So, and I was trying to use the metaphor, but I realize it's not, you know, universally applicable. But if you were to look at the two facilities as ships, right? Um, unfortunately, it's very clear to see that the supply side that's serving the gente in the lower river is a rust bucket, old, you know, 1953 rebuilt tanker, right? Whereas the Buckman diversion facility, I would look at and say, gee, this is all set up like a brand new exclusive Alaska trade polar tanker. You know, most modern bridge wings are enclosed and you never get cold and the whole thing. But there's something to that. And I think it's because, you know, the city has a louder voice and those consumers have a louder voice than we tend to as rural users, traditional community users who are just operating on a different level, right? So anyway, it was very informative. Gives me a good sense of what we can realistically do, say, from this collaborative and from any other broader water coalition. But knowing what we have in front of us, so I'm not completely discouraged or disheartened. And again, I'm really glad to see that the thinking away from this pipeline and towards managing the system in a simpler fashion that is more attentive to the existence of wet water than to the shell game of paper water. That's a good direction to be going into. So,
So Darren, this is Commissioner Anna Hansen. So they've abandoned the pipeline idea of the
No.
return credit?
That's not official in any way. That's not official in any way. But the information I got is that they're seeking approval from the state engineer to use the natural course of the river for return flow credits instead of the pipeline. And when it comes down to the I guess hardtack of it, that means that, you know, when we look at dollars and cents, that ESCA 60 million that would have been estimated to construct that thing could be better used in rehabilitation of the plant to produce quality water for downstream users, to be both for aquifer recharge in the La Cienega Valley. And then, you know, I know in La Bajada we're a little bit unique, but it improves the quality of the flow of effluent that's coming into our domestic water supply in La Bajada. So that's you know, it's looks good. And that's one of the fears that we had from this village is, well, if they don't have a duty to provide quality water to the lower river because it's just being sent back to the Rio Grande for, you know, a note in the tally book, then there's no attention being paid to the quality of it. But if it is being returned to the course of the stream, then we still go back to the conditions of the NIPDES permit for the plant, right? And that almost gives us a level of federal assurance that the quality has to be at least at that minimum, since we know that our own state is one of only 4 in the nation that relies on the federal standard because the state itself doesn't have more stringent standards. So, you know, I'm encouraged to see that. And the only thing that gives me pause is that right now it seems to be dependent on the mentality of one utilities director. you know, but I'm at least glad that we're not having to re-educate a city utilities director that come from somewhere, because at least, you know, I'll give him credit. John Dupuy has retained what he learned in working with us as just regular, you know, county folks, right? So I'm glad to see that transference of the knowledge and the thought process into the municipal arena, because there has been this adversity for so long between the city and the county that I think we're in a good spot now. I'm only sorry it depends on one person, but I hope this person, you know, I see him having a positive impact so far. And so I think whatever we can do to support that's.
So what they're
important.
saying right now is they're only going to rehab the Paseo Real plant. They're not building a new one.
No.
So
I can-
I'll
you
swing
wanna
it back to Carl, because he's in on the, you know, he
Yeah.
works for the dark side. So there you go.
No, is still a very strong interest in a new plant, and I want to clarify a couple things. No, the return flow pipeline is not out of the picture. It's in the back room right now, and hopefully we won't have to bring it out to the front. So, in terms of the new plant, there is an absolute commitment from John for a new plant. He understands what we're doing now, what they've done at the wastewater treatment plant is really a very expensive patch. And I think as you walk through that plant and you watch all the different things that he had to get working to make sure that things were working correctly, it's just dated. It's old. It doesn't, you know, and we have a nice break right now from E. coli, but that plant can go down any second and something else can go wrong. And then we're right back where we were before. And so, no, Anna, there is still a very, strong interest in a new plant. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. And I wish I had a better kind of understanding of the details. But the Corolla is one of the contractors who has worked with the wastewater treatment plant forever, and made a pretty penny over the many years that they've done all of their rehab and done this and done that. And none of it really worked as well as what Hazen and Sawyer have done in the last few months. So Corolla has been asked to provide a projection on the cost of a new plant. And my understanding, and again, don't quote me because I'm still kind of fuzzy on the information, but the quote is somewhere around $700 million. And John's gone, wait a second, we got to rethink this. And so he goes back to what he did with the Quill plant, the county plant by the state pen. And what they did there, and this is actually Bill Taylor, their procurement officer, is the one who suggested it. He said, look at design and build. And so what you do is you go directly to the guys who are building the plants and you sit down with them and talk to them about what it would cost to build a plant. So he has now, by April, have an estimate from a builder rather than an engineer firm. And he thinks it's going to come in around $300 million. But it's a tedious process. There's a lot of things, and I'm not sure if you heard this, Anna, but one of the things I'm doing are arranging for tours of the wastewater treatment plant and BDD for John. And really, one of the things he is intent on is getting feedback from people, hearing what they have to say and talking to them. So he's got a better sense of what he wants to tell the powers to be when it comes down to it. So the estimate from Corolla, I understand, is going to be here in January. The estimate from the other company will be here in April. And so he wants to, by April, have this conversation with all of us, people out in the county, people affected, people caring about the river, so that when he goes before the city council, he has something to stand on and explain what's going on. And why it is cheaper to do the design and build. So yes, there's going to be a new plant. That is what John is focused on, something that is very important to him. So that's in process. But now I want to talk a little bit about this tour that Darren took, because I'm kind of the observer sitting back, and I got to tell you, it's like all of a sudden, John and Darren are in these conversations, and I'm just going, what the hell are they talking about? You know, it's like all these different, this goes there. Why don't you have a check valve there? Why, you know, it's like this whole, and Darren's off and looking at all the piping and looking at all the details and asking John questions. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was, you know, I don't think I learned much because I don't know enough to learn, but it was really interesting to see that kind of interaction. And then, I mean, the previous guests were Andrea LaCruz Crawford, LCVA president. We had Kathleen McLeod, who heads up the LCVA PFAS subcommittee, and Sherry Muller. And so all of a sudden, that was a whole different, you know, conversation, and we sat down more, and we didn't run through the plant to look at things, but we had these very extended conversations about water. And so John's ability to adapt to whoever is there is pretty cool. But, you know, one of the things too that Darren talked about, the difference really, you know, so you go into the BDD and there's a guy named Juan who I absolutely love, who kind of, he's he's a dual operator 4, which is the highest you can get. But he's got this panel. It looks like one of those, you know, like nuclear power plant things where all the different things you're looking at. And that's what he spends his time looking at. He can tell exactly what's going on in the entire plant from that. Now you go back to the wastewater treatment plant, they've got some screens, but people aren't really used to looking at them, and they're still going around and say, oh yeah, we got a problem over there. So maybe we should, you know, think something about that. Well, by the time you see that problem, it's gotten to a point where it's a real problem and you got to deal with it, you know, and instead of catching it when it's first starting, you're now trying to catch it after it started and gone the wrong direction. So that is a personnel problem. And in terms of operators, yes, we are short operators, lots of them. And one of my roles that I've taken on is trying to recruit operators. And so we're doing it from a variety of different perspectives. One of the ones we're working with the New Mexico Rural Water Association operator program. They have an apprentice program, so we've got a couple kids coming through there. We're working with the community college to try and recruit kids in there. And one of the things we're trying to get through the city system is there's a bunch of those students who could work part-time at our plants while still going to school. Sounds like a great idea.
Ooh.
Getting that through the city HR system is an ongoing challenge. And it's frustrating.
It's impossible. It's impossible. As
It's not
somebody
as-
who sat on the BDD, it took us over a year to get just an administrator, just an administrator to the facility manager. The city HR department is a nightmare. You know, like, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I'm still going to deal with it, and we're going to figure it out. And I've got a couple ideas of how to go that. Now, one of the crazier ideas that John has come up with, which I thought was pretty cool actually, is working with the state pen. And we now are engaged in there's an agreement that's going on between inmates that are going to be released fairly soon, and taking classes at the community college that can be done online. And so we may be able to develop some kind of core group of folks coming out of the state pen, which I thought was kind of interesting. Everybody seems pretty excited about it, especially the community college and the state pen. So we'll see where that goes. And one of the things I want to do is get into the high schools and start talking to high school students about the possibilities of working as operators. And let's see, I think there's one other avenue that I can't remember what it is. And, you know, just in general, we did a job fair last week. And I find myself very aggressive in terms of selling the opportunity to work for the city, which I'm sure a lot of you is kind of a strange thing for me to be saying, but this is just a good thing to be doing. I mean, it's the water department is pretty damn important, and the whole, you know, and so it's easy for me to talk to people about what they can bring and what they can do. And to me, it's really a service to their community. I mean, what's more important than water? and so it's an easy sell. So we are trying as best we can to try and recruit people, and we will continue to do that. Another thing that came out, and you just kind of thought about it, Darren, was John talking about recharging the aquifer and mentioning that one of the best ways to do that is with acequias. And you sit there and go, well, that's kind of a crazy idea. Well, it's not a crazy idea, because that flood irrigation that has been practiced since, for the last few hundred years helps the aquifer. And so he just, at one point, and I don't know the details of this, but they're working with the Canyon Road, with the Acequia Madre folks. And it seemed to me, Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're going to be able to give the acequia some water from the city system, so that they don't just depend on that one blast in the spring and get clean thing, that there would be some sort of steady flow.
The idea is to follow the TEK, the traditional ecological knowledge from the acequeros, that said, yes, you run it in the wintertime, not just for the livestock that you're pasturing in the fields over the winter, but for we lose this when I do it because my grandpa told me to do it. I do it because my dad showed me to do it. I do it because my grandma said it works this way, right? We don't go into the details. We just get from the antepasados, this is what you do this time of year. Well, it turns out when it's examined by people, by hydrologists and they go, oh, look, this is an effective way to do aquifer recharge, especially in the winter, without the excess temperature that causes transevaporative loss, right? And actually raises the water table through the year. So when the grower is experiencing an acute drought period, the water table is already high enough that, say there's no water in the acequia, at least the plants can continue to stretch roots to a more available water table, is the simplest way I can put it, right? And so there's some we've relied on that because we've said, oh yeah, well, the acequias are going to get their water. But when you start layering over the Western water rights structure over it, is when, everybody commodifies it, and it doesn't work in that TEK framework, right? But I want to shift gears for just a second, because what you're talking about also, Carl, relates to Commissioner Hansen's main objection to this latest subdivision on the Caja del Rio, que no tiene sewer hookup, right? That's dependent on the septic systems. We all know how Commissioner Hansen feels about septic systems, right? And what I'm thinking about, even with this Cañada de los Alamos water delivery, right, is where's your sewage going? Because for us in the lower river, I'm particularly interested in your poo water, because with a plant that is either new or rehabilitated or at least functional, that means that we're not looking at mitigation of loss of 50% flow in the lower river. That means we can focus on management of water quality of the existing flow. And the more on the backside of that cycle that we can take from the consumers in projected developments and new subdivisions and all this, to get them to flow back towards either from a county plant or into the Paseo Real plant or what other facility, if that discharge water can be put back, not even necessarily by direct recharge, but into the natural courses of not just the arroyos, but the Bonanza Creek, Alamo Creek, right? Then we start to see the lower river being fed along the natural alluvial plain that comes that way. And so it's the simplest thing. And when we look for the simplest answers is when we see, oh, gee, makes a lot of sense. And when it comes down to tripping over dollars to pick up pennies, it makes a lot of sense, CENTS, that way too, right? So I think that's an important thing to consider is, You know, that water needs to make its way back to the lower river somehow. And it doesn't have to be a very complex technological fix of an injection plant and all this other thing. It means, you know, the water was impounded at a higher elevation and upstream. And if it flows somewhere back to a return, then we're talking about a real gain that we can make, right? So I don't know. I think it's again, I just wanted to mention that is maybe we're not looking at always more source, more source, more source. I think we're shifting into the realm of reuse, 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 and instead of using that to give the county more paper water to sell off to developers so they can continue to build, it turns into let's have some more wet water for the traditional users who are, and I don't even want to go here, but have priority water rights anyway, you know? So, and I think that's a good compromise, and that the conversation is talking about the physical management of wet water instead of, you know, nothing we talked about with John in those tours and talking about the bigger picture had anything to do with the paper water rights thing. That the conversation is all focused on real wet water, and that's kind of where it needs to be, you know. So
Well said. And one of the things, you know, the city of Albuquerque does a recharge and they put it in Arroyo. So, I mean, it's just one of the things, the quill plant, the county quill plant would be a perfect example of if we get that water into an Arroyo, that would make, over time, it would really help the Acequia de la Cienega and the Ugly Coo and the Acequia Cavilla. Anyway, so
and the
yeah.
longer that occurs, and even if those return flows are coming lower than the plant where the pipeline would originate, if the idea is to get the credits through the course of the Santa Fe River to the confluence with the Rio Grande, then you're making more sense because you're actually, you know, where it drops off and goes subterranean, maybe a couple miles past La Bajada toward the Loma Larga, is you know, the bosque is all still there, and I'm telling you, you go and dig down a few feet and the river's flowing and it's wet, it's flowing underwater into the bank aquifer of the Rio Grande. So if we're able to actually get wet water into the course of that river, you might actually see an extended surface flow and not have to rely on an extra hydrographic study or sample wells to go back to the state engineer and prove this, right? Because if the water master is standing there, he or she will see, no, look, there it goes, right? And further along. So
Darren,
Bobby's got a question.
yeah, no, not a question, but Darren, there's this process called LiDAR. Are you familiar with this? Okay.
yes.
So LiDAR, I have an image now of the Rio Grande in LiDAR and the Santa Fe River, and it shows the Santa Fe River meeting. It's not a big deal. You can get it through the USGS thing. You just have to do a bit of fiddling with the technology. But anyway, that you know, you don't have to do a big hydrological study. It's right there. You can
Well,
see
then,
it.
you know what, Bobby, please,
Yeah.
because you have your finger on that button and Carl was asking for it for support to the application to the OSE, please
Oh.
get those images to him and John so they can take them to the OSE and at least give that a quick visual demonstrable, dare I say, cheap solution. No, that's super helpful. But I think better than, you know, historical pictures of this and that. I think that's please make that connection.
I can do that. Okay.
Absolutely. You know, it's one, yeah, and you're right. John is preparing for a presentation to the new state engineer and to the Interstate Stream Commission, which obviously has a little help with since
Okay.
his wife is the head of the Interstate Stream Commission. But anyway, but it really is an opportunity to do something different, and hopefully we can persuade the folks to make that decision.
Can I just take the opportunity to remind people that, again, this is nothing earth shattering, nothing groundbreaking, nothing so innovative. This is looking back to the TEK solution, looking back to the simplest solution. It's not rocket surgery, you know?
Right. That's one of the things that struck me yesterday is that kind of realization. It's really the simplest solutions are often the best. And this one is a pretty simple one. So we'll continue on that path. Any other questions about the Paso Real treatment plant?
I just want to make one more comment.
Sure.
So as much as that plant is functioning right now, the director was very, very transparent about even showing me the damage control measures that are on site. And so the shift, I think the culture change that he's trying to inculcate there is coming from sort of this, well, whatever it has been, we all know what it has been. But again, back to the human element is getting the personnel to be able to operate it with foresight, with forethought, so that they're doing, you know, unfortunately, because of the state of the physical infrastructure, they've been doing nothing but damage control, damage control, damage control.
Right.
And I see that what he's trying to do is move forward towards preventive measures, towards a preventive cycle. And I'm going to just take the opportunity to say it again, because I know it's going to go off with some people. I've been saying it for years. This whole water outfit, whether it needs to be the city or the county, needs to get hip to ISO 14001, which is an international environmental standard for any type of organization. It's just a management system. It's very close to what the county does with results-based accountability. Okay. In fact, that guy, that contractor that's selling that program to the county, I can tell has his basis in Deming cycles that are based in ISO either 14,001, 45,001, or whatever. So it's also good to know that these are, you know, this is being considered. So the physical challenge of that infrastructure is what it is, but I'm glad to see that there is at least the human challenge to that, the cultural challenge to that, you know, is turning into foresight and prevention, as opposed to just, like you say, Carl, patches, expensive patches and Band-Aids. No?
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, it's like did you have a question, Maury?
Oh, you can finish your thought, Carl. I think my question is maybe a
Okay, no, I was just
wrap-up
thinking about
question.
the challenge of the personnel is a big one. Because the guys that work at the BDD, a lot of them work there since its conception. And so it's a whole different atmosphere. And John wants to take that kind of attitude and that culture and shift it over to the treatment plant. And all of a sudden you got guys that just don't get it. You know, it's just like this whole, what is this going on? We've been doing it this way forever, and now we got to do something different. So that transition, I mean, one of the things too, and he didn't talk about this, but that there's that new facility as you drive into the treatment plant on the right. It's a bunch of trailers that have been put together for a classroom because they didn't have a place where they could train all their employees at one time. So you sit there and go, well, yeah, let's get everybody together so we can talk about things, and simple things like that he's addressing pretty actively. I want to take just a little tiny break, and I want to make sure everybody knows Sage Dunn. Has everybody familiar with Sage Dunn, the BLM biologist who is planning a river restoration on the BLM?
I'm actually here too. Hi, everybody.
Yes. Hi, Sage. How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Thanks.
Cool. So that's Sage, and we're really excited about her being involved with what's going on. And we also have a person on the phone that I'm not sure who is. So if you could identify yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Hi, everyone. This is Bill Schneider with Santa Fe Water.
Oh, hey, Bill, how you doing? And then we got Patricio
Really
Pacheco. Bill, is there anything you want to add?
No, I've been very inspired by today's conversation, and we're making great progress. This has been a long road, and certainly a lot of positivity coming out. And we do have a meeting with the state engineer on December 2nd to have the conversation regarding Santa Fe River as a conveyance for return flow credits. So doing our best to keep that concept alive.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And Patricio, how you doing?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. Just Patricio Pacheco here with the City as well, Water Resources Conservation Specialist. Just here to listen in. I've been involved with the La Sangana Traditional Collaborative since we've been meeting in person pre-COVID, but here we are online. But good to see everybody.
Good to see you as well, man, as always. Okay, so let's start to talk about the Lower Santa Fe River planning process. Go ahead. Excuse me. Go ahead.
If I could just ask one more question, Carl, and Patricio and Bill, feel free to jump in as well. But I think with all of this movement happening, I'm sure I'm speaking for folks eager to support from the public side, both in ongoing explorations with the plant or other issues with the lower watershed. What sort of support does the public utility, water utility need from the public side? How can we make sure that folks are engaged and informed, so that we're all working together for the same outcomes?
Good question. So Bill, what do you think we could do to help?
Yeah, many thanks for that question. I think we're at a critical milestone with water resource planning. City and county staff are finalizing an MOU that will basically frame out a collaborative effort between the city and county to participate conjunctively on a water resource plan called Santa Fe 2100. The city's been embarking on this now going on 3 years, as well as collaborating on the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan. Both of these will be public programs. We will be having public meetings, but right now the next step is to have the governing body with the city and the BCC with the county approve the MOU. And that's going to be what I would view the primary mechanism to get community engagement and feedback and support.
Hey, Bill, when are you trying to get that in front of the BCC? This is Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, hey, Commissioner. Christella has reviewed it. We're meeting on Friday for the technical team to finalize it, and we're hoping to have it on the agenda in December or January at the latest.
Well, I suggest you get it on the agenda for the 9th of December, which means you have to have it to them by around the 1st, because otherwise you're going to have new commissioners who are not going to understand or don't have the knowledge that the current board has.
Darren?
Thank you, Commissioner. We're meeting on Friday, and I'll make that very clear that should be our objective. I think we will be ready.
And that I requested it to be on the December 9th board meeting. And
Understood. Thank you.
I'll reach out to Greg.
Okay, and meanwhile, if I can suggest, Bill, if Christella's already looked at it, then that is definitely something that should be passed on to the WPAC, so that there is a crack filling measure there between the changes of administration that are upcoming, so that we don't lose it between the terms of county commissioners, and that at least the Water Policy Advisory Committee has it in their noggin for when it needs to be reintroduced, or new commissioners need to be given some background on it. It doesn't just depend on lightning action. We're not punting, right? We're actually looking 2 maneuvers ahead. Okay.
Well, so
I think Darren, I'm not clear if I clearly understand your ask. Are you saying hold off on the December 9th target
Negative.
for the BCC
Negative.
agenda?
I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm saying throw the December 9th target, but please make sure that like I say, since Christella's aware of it and she's there at the WPAC meetings, that the rest of the WPAC knows it, so that you get the required report or advisory out of the WPAC to the BCC so that it doesn't come at them, without firm foundation. ¿Sabes?
Yep, understood. Thank you for the clarification.
Cool. Any other questions about that? That was pretty good exchange. Okay, back to the planning process. So all of you know that the previous planning process fell on its face and we didn't get anywhere. And what we are doing now, we have a subcommittee which has had some issues in terms of getting it going, but I promise by next Wednesday I will have all my shared document abilities honed and taken care of. And hopefully I'll have power, which was one issue. 5 minutes before one of our meetings, power went out and we were out for 66 hours. So that was a while. But anyway, so let's get back to this. So what the subcommittee is doing right now, and this is where I really want to make sure people understand, we're not working on the RFP. We're working on the expectations, the coalition expectations for the plan, long range, things we want to make sure are included in the plan. And if you look at that document, it is pretty impressive in my mind because it's very clear. To me, it's like an overriding document that needs to be referred to regularly by the consultant in terms of where we want to get long term, where we want to end up, things we want to get accomplished, the objectives we want to achieve. And so that's a process. Now, one of the things that Maury and I have talked a little bit about is in the previous process when we hired the consultant, two things. One, we had no ability to participate in the decision to who to hire. And that would be nice if we had that opportunity. The second part of that is once the consultant was hired, the coalition had no role or wasn't seen as a resource. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's important that we be seen as a resource. And one of the things we've talked about is how do we do that? How do we ensure that we are intimately involved with this planning process, working with the consultant, achieving the things we want to achieve and supporting their work as well. And so there are a couple ideas, and one of them I think I've kind of started to think is a pretty good one. This is Maury's idea, is to create a steering committee that would kind of oversee this. And Darren, I don't know where the WPAC comes into this. Maybe it's, and I think there's a place for that as well, the WPAC. And so to me, it would be like just a steering committee. It would be a group that'd be working with the consultants, saying, kind of reviewing things. And when it came to issues that required maybe funding, we'd be able to kind of coalesce our decisions and being able to present that either to WPAC or to the city council if we need funding. I'm rambling a little bit. So Maury, can you help me a little bit in terms of what you see this, how we can get involved?
Sure. I think our conversation was just kind of around the concern, as you were saying, from the former facilitator, that there was no consultation with any local community members, and that's a real that's an essential piece of any successful planning project. And so whatever way there can be representation of local stakeholders throughout the planning process, that's essential. So I think that a steering committee is one option that basically the facilitator and the county liaison or supervisor would work together to make sure that the project is staying on track. And so whether those individuals are identified from WPAC or from the Water Coalition or from the general community, to me there's a lot of overlap as well, because folks like Darren and Carl wear a lot of hats anyway. But I think the most important thing is having some sort of local knowledgeable stakeholders that are actively involved with hopefully the selection of the facilitator, but certainly communicating regularly with the facilitator and driving the planning process. And so I think that was kind of the extent of our conversation, of, not identifying folks who may or may not qualify for that. And it wouldn't be about, creating another entity that would last beyond this project or something, but specifically to work with the facilitator to ensure sort of a ground truthing that we unfortunately didn't see happen and seemingly derailed the former process.
So what do people think?
Darren, you have your hand up.
Okay, again, I'm just gonna, I've thought about this since we were first talking about remorphing the Pipeline Coalition to some broader water coalition, no? And I can't stop the voice in the back of my head that says, what are we doing here in a collaborative? Why are we trying to form something new? We have a wheel, maybe it needs a couple new spokes, but what are we doing? Trying to reinvent it.
Bobby,
Is it
Vern?
possible that what needs to happen instead is that we just need to reinvigorate is it that it's a traditional communities collaborative, which, sorry, I don't see, the majority of the gente showing up here, right? So is it possible that what we need to do is reinvigorate this outfit? Patricio knows, like he says, he's been there since he used to see, I bet you, remember, Patricio, when we were in the community center in La Cienega, there was a lot more gente that would show up every time, right?
That's right.
And then,
Yes, we used to have a room full, and we used to share coffee and share stories, and
Yep.
it
Right?
used to be, quite interactive. Yes.
Right. And I think that maybe the pandemic really did a blow to us all, and that maybe we lost track of when we woke up from that brain fog of where the rest of our familia was, and we need to get them back into this. That's not something new that they have to consider as some new threat or concern, but maybe let's just get back involved because we're handling these issues. Maybe that's the way to go. And I don't know. It's just a thought, and I would, how I am. I can't keep them inside the skull. So. Okay.
William, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Darren. Like he was saying that before the pandemic, we were having like 30 people meeting here, and we had Matt Miller from Senator Ben Ray Lujan's office. We had
Udall.
yeah.
Not long ago, yeah, it was Udall.
Yeah. I mean, we had the U.S. representative. We just had a lot of people coming, and I don't see. I don't understand why they're still not coming, because obviously they're on the email list, right, Carl?
Yeah, I think so.
So I do think what needs to happen is personal outreach to all of those offices. Like, they might see this and, not recognize, would they have new staff like Ledger Fernandez has? Last night I was at the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Meet and Greet, and there's a new staff from Ledger Fernandez. Her first name is Victoria. And even though Matt Miller is working for Ledger Fernandez, there's also Eric Chavez now working for Senator Lujan. And, I don't know in Heinrich's office if it's Rita
Oh, looks like we lost Commissioner Hanson. But hopefully she'll rejoin.
Okay, but I think, I think these are good points. Now, one of the things about the coalition is we're able to engage a lot of organizations, more so than we have with.
That's the thing. And I think that that's the thing that sometimes drives the gente away is they say, no, this is just another consortium of Big Green with staff, special interest groups with staff, and gives them access on our dime to the delegation or city and county staff or whatever. And so maybe that's the thing, is because, like I say, the collaborative is named Traditional Communities Collaborative. Now, I myself consider the city of Santa Fe to be a traditional community, but that depends on how you're looking at it and what your special interest is, right? And remember, a lot of our time in the shall I say the olden times was spent arguing about what environmental group was not keeping in mind the traditional communities when they had their new and innovative solutions to whatever problem was sought, be it lack of open space, be it restoration of wetlands, be it whatever it was, right? So, and I think that was a good bit of spirited discourse that used to go on there when it was the communities and these representatives of different groups showing up, and they'd get some perspective on it. I think to separate it's unnecessarily exclusive, right? If we keep on, there was never a lack of seats at the table for either federal, state, county, or city staff at the Traditional Communities Collaborative. But I think if you put it to it, but I did see that in the Pipeline Coalition started turning into abogado de aquí, abogado de allá, and then, a bunch of lawyers and this and that, and the people were not participating.
Darren, I want to address something with this, but so just to so the first thing is that this is the Santa Fe River Traditional Community Collaborative. That's it's the river is the main focus, and to have as many people, as you said, engaged who have been, anyway, so that, yes, I agree totally. But as far as the Pipeline Coalition thing goes, I mean, sometimes there were three of us. So it'd be Carl and me and Roger trying to put together this little document, which would be really difficult to do with a big group of people, that includes everybody, that speaks to, that is putting forth what we want, and how we want to, work with and collaborate with lots of different people for the lower Santa Fe River, and to, I think that's all it was. And it is putting in, adding a spoke to the wheel. Absolutely. It is that. But it was just like, like maybe at the most there were 5 people there, maybe 6, 7 in the beginning. And then, so.
Well, and to be just blunt about it, Bobby, that's because of the participation of certain groups that had already had a negative interaction with the traditional communities. And look, one of those certain groups turned off and took their wide hips and broad shoulders off to do a backroom deal with the city anyway. So, this is the only thing I'm saying gives me pause, is that perhaps it's easier to restore that trust in this outfit than it is to get anybody to buy into a completely new, although I know it's not completely new, but there's a place at which we have to repair that trust. And I don't know if it's by starting a new coalition or if it's by using what we have right here in front of us. I don't know. I'm sorry, just getting stuff out about it.
Hey, I'm sorry I lost connection, but I just want to also let you all know that when I do leave office, I will continue to be on the Santa Fe River Commission for the city of Santa Fe, and I will be happy to participate as a member of that group. And I think that that is a really important group that you need at this meeting.
You know, and you know, from another perspective, in terms of the coalition, it's a broader group of folks. And that's helpful when if we ever decide to go for grants and apply for funding. It's nice to have that broad support. And the way we've worked it, and Bobby was pretty succinct in terms of explaining it. We have the coalition creates a subcommittee, people volunteer to be on the subcommittee. We do the work, we come up with whatever work we decided to work on, and we present it to the coalition membership for their approval. And once we get their approval, then we go to whatever, you know, it's either county or city or to some other resource in terms of explaining the decision that we made. And to me, that's a good process, and it certainly enhances our standing among water issues. And I appreciate completely and totally, Darren, the issue with the gente downstream. And I want to clarify one thing about the Wild Earth Guardians settlement with the city. So that's always been kind of a bugaboo for everybody, saying, well, they went off behind their back. Well, they didn't go behind our back.
Well, I didn't say it was them, but okay.
Yeah, it was them. And so what happened is the coalition throughout that protest time kept telling people, okay, here's the protest dates. These are the things you got to do to be able to protest. And we as an organization said, we don't have standing. We can't go in because we don't have any water rights. We don't have standing. And so we didn't make an effort as a group or make a decision as a group to protest it. There were two people that one organization and one person. Jerry Jacoby was a protester, as was the Wild Earth Guardians. Now the Wild Earth Guardians settled with the city to drop their protest, and they got $60,000 for restoration. So that was something we were aware of. We weren't aware of the negotiations, and I agree with that completely. That was something that I think Daniel Timmons was regretted, that we weren't more involved in that decision process of the settlement. But we weren't, and it happened, and there's $60,000 sitting out there. So there wasn't really a backroom deal. It was just one that they're the only people that end up protesting the return flow pipeline.
Okay, and to be fair, Carl, I'm going to say, because most of the people that were on the asymmetrical side of that don't have the resources to engage lawyers or prepare their protest before the hearing officer at the state engineer, were trusting that ESCE coalition that was representing them, that they were a part of, was going to do it. And I think maybe the participation of the Acequia Association had something to do with that también, that we figured that, you know, yeah, at least we're putting our input into this coalition, and there will be some coalesced position that's going to revolve on that. And it turns out that the first guys that bail out, you know, are the most litigious, well-funded member of the coalition, and they turn their back on it. They're, like you say, it wasn't open and transparent what they were doing about it, or they would have brought it up at a coalition meeting, and then we would have known, you know what, too bad, we better get our shit together and go file our protests, right? So
anyway, yeah, well,
okay.
it's a bad water under the bridge at this point. That's a bad pun. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so we're here now. Let's see what we can do moving forward. And I think we've covered everything. And one of the things too, I want to make sure, and this is something for you, Andrew, is that the RFP that the La Cienega Valley Association is engaging with, and their focus is spring restoration. And I want to make sure whatever we're doing with the RFP doesn't conflict or, there's no tension between the two, that somehow these RFPs working cooperatively to make sure we're getting the biggest bang out of the buck that we can. And so that's just something down the road that we want to make sure that we're doing. Okay. And I think working with city and county stuff, I think we're getting there. I don't think that's a huge issue. And I think maybe we just need to be more prominent or more aggressive in making sure that once we are engaged and ready to present things, that we get cooperation and support from city and county folks. But we're not quite there yet in terms of our planning. And so down the road, I think that's going to be an important part of the entire process.
Hey, Carl, this is, one of the things that I always thought, and I've kind of been involved for a while too, and really value this group, and feel like we have more in common than we do have differences. Always felt like the Lower Santa Fe River Collaborative would be best served to have essentially an A team and a B team, where the A team would focus on issues on the Lower Santa Fe River specific. So that would be PFAS. That would be the sort of raging wetland beaver issue that challenged sort of deliveries to the lower acequias. Main stem Santa Fe River issues, and then pivot to the second team, which would then focus on Cienega issues, which are, tied to development, groundwater pumping, drought. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like part of where I think Darren's frustration that I observed comes from is we haven't made progress on certain issues because we get entangled with some of these overarching issues that aren't specific maybe to some of the city initiatives. And so we stumble. And so it's just an observation.
Well, I don't know. That sounds
think,
okay,
Darren?
but I disagree with that because I've seen the segmentation of like, well, this is our water and this is your water and that's that water, and then like, so can't we I like the idea of like, I live in the city, so I poop and my sewage goes into the Paseo de Real, and that water goes into the river, and all of you know that my concern is for the watershed and the whole river, from the upper watershed to the Rio Grande, the whole river. So I don't know, Bill. Yeah.
That's an important distinction.
I think Bobby nails it in that it was formed as the Santa Fe River Traditional Communities Collaborative, not the Lower Santa Fe River Traditional Communities Collaborative. And if we look back to 2011, from it formed out of the 2011 resolution from the county for drought mitigation procedures and all that. And at that point, the talk of the town at the same time was the living river through the city, all the way to Agua Fria, all the way to the right. So those were things that the River Commission was formed around the same time to do the same thing. So I don't know about that. And as much as Bill, you and I know that there are, if we can segment that river into at least 5 different zones that require different tactics because of their, what's happening geographically along the course. So 5 different reaches of the river. But I don't think that should take away from Bobby's concept, dare I say it, rivers run through us, right? That it is a whole river. And we've talked a lot about it being a whole and holistic system. And the more that we can keep that intact, okay. But I think Bill's right in terms of needing to assign tactics. I mean, strategy is one thing, that's the whole river. And then there's tactics that may be broken down into 5 riparian zones for what specifically needs to happen. And so maybe it's not just an A team and a B team. Maybe it's, additional ways to do it that can focus on each individual impact or whatever. But I just want to say one more time, I think that I'm really happy to see that we're not necessarily looking at, again, damage control or mitigation because of this one unilateral city decision to do this pipeline. That hopefully what we're looking at is, management of it, ongoing management of a whole system, as opposed to what do we do now if there's 50% loss in flow, right? So again, not sure,
Darren,
just saying.
in all due respect, Darren, I agree. Again, I was trying to come up with an alternative solution to focus on what I would say key action items that we can make progress on. Just one respectful difference is that the San Juan Chama Return Project is a regional project tied to the Buckman Direct Diversion. It's a city-county project. And so let's just remind ourselves of that, please.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a MOU and they have their own joint board and all this. And so, so that's the thing. Is there a seat at the table for them in this collaborative? Or do we need to wait until we form some new broader coalition to be able to engage them directly?
And when you engage who? Are we talking the state engineer or are we?
No, let's talk about the board of the BDD, the joint city county board under that MOU of the BDD.
Well, I defer to you on that. Again,
where
the
is
city's
that
interest is
entity?
specific
Where do we ever
to
see
San
that?
Juan Chama water, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we should realign sort of the objectives of this group, maybe to how this conversation started of trying to improve our process. And maybe the lower Santa Fe River planning process is the avenue. Maybe it's this more broader Santa Fe 2100, or maybe it's Peaks to Rio. Like if we get that grant, maybe
Right.
that, again, we have a lot of options.
Right. And maybe, and so that's the only thing that concerns me is if there's too many clearinghouses to go to get the issues together, then there's not a clearinghouse at all. Then we're still siloed and we're still not putting it all together so that we can all consider it and participate, so I don't know, but Carl, thanks for Maury, thanks for at least putting this together so we can think this stuff out together.
I agree completely. Now, one of the things too, next in our next meeting, which is in January, Emily Wolf, who is the new Rio Grande coordinator for American Rivers, is going to join us. And I was thinking a conversation I had one time with.
She's also co-chair of the WPAC.
Yeah. We had a conversation among some of the folks with American Rivers. And at one point they mentioned I mentioned the idea of the acequias forming a kind of a group, all the traditional acequias, because that would become a kind of a powerful part of the collaborative, is to have that. So it's one of those ideas that I just thought was kind of interesting. But if you get all these acequias in La Cienega, in Agua Fria, and in La Bajada together to form their opinions and ideas and things, that would enhance our efforts to move things forward. So it's just a thought. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's happening today. There's a lot of ideas out there that we need to sit down and talk more about. We'll make sure we do that at the next meeting. Yeah. Any thoughts?
On that one, the Acequia Association, as you know, lost Enrique Romero fortunately, to the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty Division of the State Department of Justice. So that's a good move. But the youngster that has replaced him, this Villapando, Aron Villapando, needs to be brought in on that level. And so again, it doesn't need to be an effort maybe by this collaborative to recruit and engage the local acequias. That's something that we can put up to. I think Andrew just noted that the Congreso begins tomorrow and runs through Saturday. It's something that we can put to Arron Villapando to say, this is a medium in which to ask them to get involved on this level with this collaborative or with this coalition, whatever it turns out to be. But and I'm not sure between Capilla Vieja and Guicu and La Ciénega. I mean, La Bajada is organizationally a member of the association, but I don't know if the others are. And maybe that's the thing to do, is say, well, yeah, you guys get in with that or whatever, or have them facilitate it so that we don't just stack up more tasks for you and Maury and Bobby, and that, you know, that we ask Arron to get involved in it.
That makes sense. A lot of sense. Do you know him well enough that you can, maybe we can invite him to the next collaborative meeting?
Yes, he's asking for his orientation yeah, what's the other O in UDA? Orientation and observation, right? Yeah.
We'll make that a point for our the January meeting. Begin his education. I think that's a great idea. And you're exactly right. I mean, that should be the force, overarching force that assists us and supports our effort in terms of acequia management.
And then again, to your point, for presenting community support for funding, or just to demonstrate the strength of the grassroots, where we name ourselves individually and this and that, that's still important, you know. But it's also good to have a couple of points of unification and solidification, right? So when you get an association, then you still name them, but then you still name each acequia individually, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So is it possible to have a meeting, say, in person in La Ciénega, you know, at the community center, say in the spring sometime?
Sure.
That we all meet in person?
Yeah, we can do that.
Could we
I
do
mean,
that?
one of the problems is just access. You have to go through the whole key process, and anyway, but it's definitely something we can do.
And
Yeah, so
just
let's
to
plan
let
at
you
least
know
one meeting
that
in early spring in La Ciénega, and we'll gather and see how many folks we can bring into the fold, and maybe we'll be able to do a really good rundown about where we're at. And yeah, that's cool. That's a great idea.
well, just to let you know, Bobby, that their last concilio meeting, the board of directors of the Acequia Association, their concilio last met in La Ciénega Community Center not too long ago. I don't see the date written. We were there, but they just had their meeting there because they like to go from community to community to hold their board meeting, right? So we ended up on the next on the list. So we were able to bring the lower Santa Fe River issues to them. So it's not like we're coming at them blindside. No, they're aware. They're waiting for that phone call, but I'm not going to make it till I hear from the rest of my primos up and down the river like you, right? So.
Okay, that's great.
I would love to. I think an in-person spring meeting sounds really good. And to echo what Darren was saying, I think that now is a really good opportunity to think strategically about how all of these different groups are relating, or how we're being redundant, how we're siloing ourselves, or how we could do a better job of connecting with each other and making sure that the issues we're tackling and the ways we're collaborating are as effective and efficient as possible, since we do have a lot of really big issues to solve, and we have a lot of really big opportunities because of that right now, to make sure that the ways that we're gathering are effectively serving everyone that is being affected by all of these challenges and opportunities. So I think that having a strategic conversation going off of, well, what Darren and Bill and William and Bobby have all been saying is, you know, what previously may have worked or been a great system, it might be worth revisiting to look forward at what issues are coming and what relationships need to be strengthened in order to make sure that our communities are resilient, that our river is resilient, moving forward. So, I mean, the coalition and the collaborative are just one piece of that, but even, thinking about these other planning efforts, WPAC, BCC, BDD, there's so many people doing a lot of work, but how are we engaging? How are acequias engaging? How's the Caja Coalition involved, or how does that connect? There's so much going on, or the grazing associations, and everything is connected. So how can we reduce our redundancy, but also not make our group so big that nothing ever gets done, but I think those are really important conversations to have very intentionally, especially now while so much is getting updated. We have a lot of power, I think, right now to really drive some important changes, or make sure we're bringing forward what has been working and continuing to support it.
Well spoken. It was well said. And we'll do it. We'll figure it out. Anything else for today, folks? I had put on long-term projects, and I want to think that through a little bit more. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm getting ahead of myself, and so let's back off on that for a while, and we'll talk a little bit more down the road.
Maybe that's what Maury just described.
Yeah, it is kind of. I agree. And Andrew, you've been very quiet, but you've been giving us a lot of information. You have anything you'd like to share with us? We can't hear you.
Carl, did you call on me?
No, I called on Andrew.
Okay, I heard an A, but
Yeah.
I do want to let Maura know that I will respond with a new email address.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great. We'll be sure to put your new email address on the list. Thank you, Commissioner.
Andrew, you got your sound thing figured out? Hey, Sage, you have anything you'd like to add today?
I feel like I've got some things to figure out. I reached out to Darren to try to get some information there. Really, the work I want to do is supporting everything you guys are talking about. And it's just a matter of what the best way is to engage the communities and get everybody on board and know what we're doing. So, perhaps a presentation come spring in person. But I really appreciate being involved at these meetings, and continue to invite me, and I'll make it when I can. And yeah, we actually had a meeting yesterday with BOR, and talking about the NEPA process that we're working on with this paper water pipeline situation. And so, I'm engaged with that. It's really nice that there is it's hopeful to hear that there's potentially a better option than that pathway. But yeah, happy to anybody reach out to me if you have any thoughts. And I will be reaching out too. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Sage. And just for everybody's perspective, Sage grew up in Madrid, which I think is a really cool place to grow up. So that's an aside. So Andrew, did we ever figure out your sound yet?
Can you hear me?
Yes. You can.
There's a side button here. It's easy to hit me when you're putting your headphones on and off. It's a mute button. So anyway, yeah, in terms of like the future and trying to secure grant funding for our water programs or support your community area, state or federal funding, our future relationship with the federal government will be speculative really, I guess, at this point in terms of funding levels. But I'm thinking maybe some prime urgency if there's some federal funding opportunities out there that I can pursue for us. Maybe
You know,
deadlines. Yeah,
One
go
of
ahead.
the things, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, I mean, meaning things, I know there's a few I'm aware of that are gonna, deadlines that are coming up for different federal agencies within the next few weeks. And my coworker, Adeline in Open Space has forwarded some of those to me. I'm gonna be on the phone with Genevieve Allen at BOR later today. But yeah, we're open to, whatever we can pursue within the next few weeks, whether it's, USDA, Healthy Soils, or BOR. I'm not that familiar with BLM, if there's any opportunities we could pursue. And there's EPA as well. So anyway, I'll be looking at, I'll search those online and see what's available.
Cool.
And one of the things too, Andrew, it's one of those things that we talk about a lot, but we need to make some effort to make sure it happens. But to make the new treatment plant a county city facility, it's time, it's needed, and I think that enhances the ability to us to serve the community. But it also enhances our ability to provide clean water down that river. I think that's, one of our mottos has always been a clean, steady stream of water in the river. That's what we want. We want to see a steady, and I want to start at the upper watershed, and I want it to go through town. That we have a river, an actual river that goes through all the way to La Bajada. And I think when you start talking to John, he's got these ideas, and I'm just going, well, yeah, that makes sense. And one of the things I didn't mention, and I haven't mentioned for a while, that he talked about yesterday is the fact that El Dorado is now taking wells offline, and they're taking county water, and it's something he negotiated and made happen. And the 4 wells that are most important to La Cienega are the ones in the Tzuki Ancha formation. And they had been drawn down, and apparently they're starting to pick back up. But those are the wells that most impact those alluvial plains that head to La Cienega. And so those are the kinds of things, you do those little changes now, long term, it starts to make a real difference. We're not going to expect tomorrow morning the springs are going to be flowing in throughout La Cienega, but long term, if we can do some smart things along the way, that we'll be able to do those kind of things and get the river living again. I mean, if you go back in time, the La Cienega Creek was one of the major tributaries to the Santa Fe River. Well, it ain't now, because it dies when the people start watering their landscape. Just when we need the water, it goes away. So anyway, thank you all for being here as always. As I always say, this is my favorite group to sit and chat with. And I think we've got some opportunities ahead of us and some new energy. And so let's just continue forward and see where we can get. But we're definitely going to have a spring event of some sort, maybe a full day. Anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll figure that out, but something special in the spring for the collaborative. So thank you all. Safe travels for you, Maury. She's going far away. Just be safe. So anyway, have a great day, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Maury.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.